Existence of God. First, the arguments against the existence of God. When you're doing apologetics and you are defending the faith, the number one, you want to get God right. You want to get the Trinity right. You want to be able to defend the deity of Christ. You want to show in the New Testament, the Old Testament, where Jesus is God. You want to show the Trinity in the New Testament, Old Testament. You want to review that video that we have online. And when I'm putting these up there, there's a lot of extra material that we're not doing in class that's on there that I'm adding to what I'm recording today, just so you know. So if you want to review, when you go back to see it, you'll see a dozen other expositors besides me added to this. And they're saying their stuff, and I'm showing examples of it. Because in here, I'm teaching it, but we're not doing it because you're not, all of you know that God exists, unless somebody was playing devil's advocate, and I won't give my wife that permission slip. The short form philosophical criticism of monotheistic God is viewed by Judaism and Christianity, along with the short answers covered in great detail later in this document. Evil. This is the first argument. There can't be a God because evil exists. God cannot be all powerful, all knowing, and all good at the same time. The problem with this argument against God is that if evil's not possible, then we don't have free will. Have any of you ladies ever been pursued by a guy that knows you're his soulmate and you just ain't feeling it? That's a nightmare. You know what I mean? My daughter would say, right off the bat, always a good Christian girl, missionary and all that kind of stuff. And when she was growing up, she would say, Dad, what do I do? Like, the boys in church are always wanting to go out and asking me out. I don't want to go out. I want to go out with a group. I don't want to go out on a date. I don't want to do that. And I said, well, if you just tell him he's got to ask me, you have to ask my dad. And if you don't want to, go on because sometimes even in the group, she didn't want to go on a date with him in the group. Like she just wanted to go. And then she wanted to go home. You know what I mean? He's like 13. And I said, just do this. If he stinks, do this. And I'll tell him, yeah, no, you ain't going out. I go, why not? Yeah, I don't care. Because you're a jerk, or because I'm a jerk. I don't care. Just do this. And don't do this if you say, okay, yeah, we can sit together at church today or whatever. You know what I mean? And without free will, you can't love. And if you're going to allow free will, you have to have evil. You have to. If you don't have the option, let me tell you something. Even the angels in heaven have free will. Satan fell, took a third of the angels with him. You don't lose your free will when you go to heaven. When you die and go to heaven, you still have your free will. With any luck, you'll learn from it. I don't see anyone jumping out of heaven now. But even Satan had free will. Because if I force you to love me, that ain't love, that's slavery. That's disgusting. That's rape. You know what I'm saying? God's not that guy. If you don't want, I have the self-respect where if you don't want me, I'll walk. You don't think God has that? Like he needs to force people to do that? That's Calvinism. That's disgusting. Pain. Because God allows pain, disease, natural disasters to exist. He can't be all powerful, also all loving, all good, in the human sense, at least, of these words. That's the second argument, pain. The problem with this argument, we have free will that true love demands. then evil, rejection of God and his will for us, that's the result. That's often, we're not created to suffer pain, but we chose it when Adam fell into sin, and Adam wasn't alone because we've followed suit. We've done the same thing. We've continued in his footsteps. In a sense, we seconded the motion. The third one is injustice. Destinies are not allocated. The third argument against the existence of God is it's not fair. How many of you ever heard that one? If there was a God, why does a guy that I know who rapes somebody ends up with a life sentence for raping and killing somebody? Kid ends up in jail, life sentence, and in jail, you, the taxpayers, paid for his sex change. And my buddy, Leo, one of my best friends in the world in Ohio, his daughter at 9 years old gets neuroblastoma. I'm the coach, coaching her in soccer, and the kids are out there playing, and she was a pretty physical kid. Takes a shot, uses her body to block the soccer ball. You can't use your hands. You know how you do it. And she's trying to control the ball with her body. Done it a bazillion times, flat on her face. What's going on? What's going on? Time, because they're like 8 years old. Mom goes running out on the field. Get up. What's the matter with you? Like, be tough, No, Mom, I ain't getting up. She puts her hand, she had a tumor that was growing, neuroblastoma. She was dead in 13 months. Fastest, it's an orphan disease, only 269 cases a year globally. So how does she die? Before she died, had 2 visitations by angels. Angels came and talked to her. Twice. 2 angels. What a kid. I got a video of her. You should see her. And how is it fair that this one guy is in jail and we're paying for his oatmeal and his bacon and eggs every morning for the next 40 years with his new boobs and stuff? How is that fair? How is there a God if that happens? I want to show it to you. Can you move that so this will work? Because we didn't get this. You won't forget this. I got all this in your notes. I've done it before in class. This is when you're born. This is how the world views justice. This is where you're dead. You divide your life up into 3: Western culture, 21st century civilization. This is how you just fair and unfair. The first third of your life is where you learn. That's where you're going to school. Your parents are teaching you. This first third of your life is you're learning, you're gaining experience from birth all the way till 20 whatever, right? Depending on what happens. The second third of your life, so this is learn. This is earn. And this is burn. The second third of your life is where you're earning. If you did this really good, you don't have to write it down. It's already in your notes on the last page. I want you to focus on this. The first third of your life, you're learning everything that you learn, right? And if you do it well, you can earn for a long period of time. And you could earn here, you can become very prosperous. If you did this right, you do good here, right? Typically. If you do this right, you may even be able to shorten this and not have to work so long. And this is where you burn. Where you take all that money you've piled up and your wife goes shopping and you buy the boat, right? And we do what we want. We finally, the kids are out of college and we go traveling. We start hitting the cruise circuit, Do whatever, right? Y'all get that?
Yeah.
Right? Learn over it. Now, Leo's daughter, right here, she gets cancer and she dies. How is that fair? This is how the world does this. This is why they're pissed at God. This is what's happening. And that other guy, he's up here, 75 years old, with his plastic bolt-on boobs in jail, that raped and killed. How is this fair? I'm going to show you how that's fair and how it's just. Because this is a lie. It's not a lie because anything I said here was incorrect. It's correct, but it's a lie because it's incomplete. Okay? Now I want to make a little adjustment here. I'm going to keep the essential line. So looking at the life again, right? Learn, earn, and burn is here. Right here. Learn, earn, and burn. And this, rest of this, is eternity. And you take that line here and you put it here. Because I know that little girl that I held, that I played soccer with, that was with my daughter, best friends. This here is that guy in jail, or her, or you, or all of us. This, somewhere around here, it's all going to make sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is life. And that's why we have to trust God. And that's why God is just. Because He's not limited to learn, earn, and burn. And you got one chance here to make it right. And if your mom and dad get a divorce at 7, when you're 7 years old, it's going to screw you up for good. And that's your one shot. Now, you have an 8 times higher risk of having a serious altercation with the law by the time you're 16. Before you even drive a car, before you even get your license, before it's legal to drink 1 beer, you have 8 times the chance of getting a serious altercation with the law because of something crappy that happens here. But if you trust in God, this is your picture. And this is your future. And let the devil screw with that. Or whoever you're arguing with for that instance. Okay, so that's the injustice argument. I like talking about that one the most. All right. Multiplicity. Since the gods of various religions differ widely in their characteristics, only one or none of them can be possibly right. And I kind of agree with that argument partially. My difference with position would be that just because some people have been or are obviously wrong, doesn't mean the God of the Bible doesn't exist. It's kind of a lazy man's argument. You understand what I'm saying? There's so many gods to choose. I don't want to choose any of it. It's kind of like when you open up your fridge and there's so much food in there, you don't want to cook nothing. You just close it and look for the Oreo cookies that I bought and I put up at the top. You're laughing, but you would all go for them Oreo cookies. Simplicity. Since God is invisible or hidden, the universe is no different than if He did or did not exist. It's simpler to assume that He doesn't exist. You can read Occam's razor on the next page. The simplest answer is usually the best. That's another lazy man's argument, and it may be simpler, but I don't believe it pays off in the long run. Primarily, in order to win that part of this argument, you have to be able to defend a historical Jesus and the God of the Bible, the deity of Christ, that He lived. And these are the people that don't take Jesus serious. And in order to hit that, in order to combat that, you have to show that Jesus really did, that He did die, and make the rational arguments for Jesus to be raised from the dead. The most common arguments for the existence of God and the corresponding objections. The first one is ontological. I'm not going to go into it. I have a good video for that from William Lane Craig who explains that so beautifully. And it's over my, you know what I'm talking about, John? That's,
He goes on like I took.
we can't hear you if you don't have a microphone. Do we have one?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
you
got it.
do.
Okay, so yeah, William Lane Craig. All I was going to say was I did a couple of years in my undergrad in philosophy, and that guy, I mean, he'll give an argument, and it'll take me a week to actually understand it. I mean, that's how far beyond this guy
Not
is
only that, it'll take
philosophically.
him a week to present the argument.
Yes, yeah,
Because
yeah,
he does not talk fast.
yeah.
He's not Frank Turek.
Yeah, no, he's not. But he's a genius.
And we're going to use his argument on the ontological argument. The ontological argument, in a sense, is a purely philosophical argument that because it's possible to imagine that God exists, he must exist. And if you listen to him talk about this long enough, it actually makes sense. Causality. Causality, design, fine-tuning, these are my favorite arguments. The causality argument, if you're going to argue causality, everything that exists has to have a cause that brought it into existence. It's impossible to go backwards to infinity with causes because then you'd never reach to today. There would be more yesterdays to go through. We would have never gotten today. We know that the universe had a beginning. Time, space, and matter started. Hubble proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, what happened to create it? If time, space, and matter all came into existence at the Big Bang, what banged what?
That's not his fingers.
Right? What's that?
That's not his fingers.
I still didn't get that.
God snapped his fingers.
Oh, yes, like God snapped his fingers. No, he didn't. He spoke it.
I
He
know,
spoke
I was
it.
joking.
You're wrong. See, you were influenced by the Avengers when Thanos. Everything that exists has a cause. So causality, the best way to surmise this, the easiest way to do this, if you are walking down the beach, say we all take a Bible study, we all go to the beach, and you guys are walking a little bit behind me and Stacy kind of went off ahead, and you see a heart with DH plus SH and an arrow going through it. You know crabs didn't do that. You know that wasn't eroded by the waves of the beach. You know I wrote that because I'm trying to impress her, right? Like you could tell that. How much more complicated are we than that? And yet we're supposed to expect nothing created everything.
That takes more faith than believing in God.
It does. It takes a lot more faith that we believe that God created everything. The atheist believes nothing did something to nothing to make everything. So you have two choices. No, that's your choice. Either God did it, God created everything, and they think that's insane. But you believe nothing did something to nothing. What's worse? What's the worst proposition? That God created, that a being outside of time, space, and matter created time, space, and matter, or that nothing created time, space, and matter?
Yeah,
It doesn't make sense. Design, the universe. The third argument because we're already after 8. The third is design. The third argument for the existence of God is design. The universe, from atoms to galaxies, showed clear signs of design. Therefore, there must be a designer. You wouldn't go, if you travel from here, you go to South Dakota or North Dakota, whichever Dakota it is, and you go to the Black Hills, you'll see Mount Rushmore carved in the side of a cliff. There's no way you would assume wind eroded that and carved that out in that shape. You know somebody did that there was an intelligent designer that plotted that out and carved it out. Well, look in the mirror, folks. You're a lot more complicated than a picture of you. A lot more. Nobody would think erosion did that in that detail. And it's just an image of what you are. And self-replicating, procreating, living, breathing, loving, caring, thinking. Just your eyeballs and the way you blink, how it nourishes your eyes with the fluid and keeps the dust out of them with your eyelashes. Think about it. And we're supposed to believe that was just by accident. But Mount Rushmore, boy, that was carved on purpose. That's a design argument. The fourth one, the fine-tuning argument, that animals, plants, all life for that matter, requires certain parameters to exist. Gravity, water, air, heat, light, all these things. They all require the laws of physics, and those laws of physics that are referred to in science as constants are very fine-tuned and maintained rigorously. Who's maintaining them? The mathematical odds of this happening by chance are absurd. And let me tell you something. Those laws need to be maintained. They don't just stay on their own. Second law of thermodynamics, entropy, prevents it. The second law of thermodynamics prevents those laws from being self-maintaining. They would have to wane with everything else. What holds them as constants? I'll tell you, God does. That's the only answer. Has to be somebody outside of time, space, and matter. Then you go back to causality. If everything had a cause, who's the causer? Who caused it? The atheist has no answer for that, ignores it, but thinks you're nuts because you think God did it, where they think nothing did it. Experiential. That's my favorite. Experiential. They're all my favorite arguments, let's just be honest. Except for ontological. That's a little fluffy for me. Experiential. Billions of people claim to have personal religious experience involving God. Some of these involve life after death. They just did a movie on that we saw maybe within the last year. Just about life after death experiences. People leaving the body, going up, starting to go up to heaven, some even seeing God. But as they're leaving, see a car accident outside the hospital because the ambulance and traffic, it's a high accident area. See an accident, hear conversations. I just saw a video of someone today as they're going up. She's saying, so what was it like going on the way to the tunnel and all that, the light at the end of the tunnel? He said, oddly enough, there was music playing, Hotel California. And I know it sounds dumb, don't it? And sure enough, one of the kids was listening to Hotel California in the waiting room on her headphones. That's what I was listening to. Oh yeah, I heard it. You should turn those headphones down. They're not that sealable. But there's movies and whole books just on miracles, and a lot of it is life after death experience of Christians and other people that weren't Christians that went forward, and then they could verify the integrity of the claim by the conversations the doctors were having while they were trying to resuscitate them. That, yeah, the one girl, I was floating above my body, and all of a sudden I saw a nurse fall down. And then they would say, what happened? What happened? Something wet on the floor. And they picked her up and they, get it clean, get it clean. And they're screaming, clear, clear, clear. And I'm watching all this and I'm wondering, somebody better get that, And then they wake her up and she tells the story. It's like, yeah, I was the one that fell, So the experience. That is the fifth argument for the existence of God. There's your pictures. So you remember to do the learn, earn, and burn if you ever have to explain it to somebody else. And the back page is kind of funny. Hope you enjoy it. All right, it's 10 after 8. What's the matter? Were you a bunch of religious freaks? It's time to get out of here. Ryan, close this in prayer, my brother.
So what is the ontological argument?
The ontological argument, in a nutshell, says that if it's even possible that God exists, then it follows that God actually exists. And this argument has been stated and defended with great sophistication by philosophers like Alvin Plantinga, for example. And I, like you, am persuaded that this is actually a sound argument. And basically what Plantinga says is, define a maximally great being to be a being that is metaphysically necessary, omnipotent, omniscient, and morally perfect. Now, if it's possible that there is such a being, then there's a possible world in which that being exists. But if a maximally great being exists in any possible world, it exists in all possible worlds. That's part of what it means to be maximally great. Therefore, it exists in the actual world. Therefore, a maximally great being exists. And the steps of this argument, your viewers may be surprised to learn, are actually relatively uncontroversial. The whole argument stands or falls with the first premise. Is it possible that a maximally great being exists? If you think it's possible that God exists, then you ought to believe that God actually exists. The atheist has to say not merely that God does not exist, but that it's impossible that God exists.
So the typical comeback doesn't even meet this argument. So just for the folks who haven't studied the ontological argument at all, the typical comeback is, imagine a maximally great island, the greatest island you've ever heard of. Well, then it must exist by using the exact same principles here. But what you would say is there's no possibility of a maximally great island because that description is simply too vague. There's no way to actually
that would be
down.
One of the problems with it. What contributes to the greatness of islands? Do you prefer a desert island or one chocked with hotel resorts? There isn't any really objectively such a thing as the greatest conceivable or maximally great island. So it turns out that these attempts to parody the argument by talking about a maximally great pizza or a necessarily existent lion all fail because they postulate incoherencies. When the idea of a maximally great being, that is to say a being that is omnipotent, omniscient, and morally perfect, in every possible world, does seem to be an intuitively coherent and therefore possible idea.
Let's talk about the moral implications if there is no God. And so I feel as if we're living through the beginning stages of this moment right now in America, because if everyone gets to determine their own truth and determine their own morality, well, then who's to say what is right or wrong? Why should children not be exposed to highly pornographic material? What difference does it make? Who's to say my truth says differently? What are the societal moral implications when you do not believe in first a God, or at least a moral giver or a moral law that is absolute and not something that is relative?
Well, this is another one of those effects that I mentioned earlier. When someone says, how do you know God exists? You're reasoning from effect to cause. So we've reasoned from the effect known as the universe back to a spaceless, timeless, immaterial cause. Now when we get a moral law written on our hearts that, say, Thomas Jefferson would say is self-evident, that the Apostle Paul said the Gentiles and have the law written on their hearts, that's from Romans chapter 2. These laws that are pressing on us are effects. The question is, what caused these effects? The effect for a moral law is a moral lawgiver. So we're reasoning from effect back to cause. And so that's another way we know that God exists. Here's the ugly truth. If there is no God, then nothing is ultimately right or wrong. Everything's just a matter of opinion. It's just your opinion against, say, Hitler's opinion. It's just your opinion against Putin's opinion, or whoever you think is evil. It's your opinion against anyone that says something is right or wrong if there's no God. Everything's just a matter of opinion. Well, we know murder is not just a matter of opinion. We know rape is not just a matter of opinion. We know that those things are really objectively morally wrong. And if they're objectively morally wrong, there must be a standard of rightness that defines what goodness is, and any deviation from that standard would be what we would call evil, like murder or rape or theft or whatever those things are. In fact, I think it's the most powerful argument today for the existence of God, because no matter where you go, Charlie, whether you're dealing with an atheist, an agnostic or a Christian or a Muslim, whoever you're dealing with, they think certain things are morally right and certain things are morally wrong.
And so, Frank, I think we're starting to see in our society an entire generation that has been plagued by the inability to differentiate what is real and what is not. And it's a term that I'm workshopping, but it really is kind of this plague of the imagination versus reality. What do I mean by this? You have a generation that is staring at screens where they just see photons all day long, whether it be video games or hypergraphic pornography or just talking to friends that quite honestly don't exist in the metaverse, and then they have to come into the world that isn't as stimulating as that video game, and their entire neuro profile is completely messed up. And they ask the questions, what is even real? And this is where they say, well, I know God for sure is not real because I can't see God like I can see the video game in front of me.
The Rush Bible Study is held at Dream City Church's own Glendale campus every Tuesday night at 6:30. We hope to see you soon. Bye.